Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are excited about today's conversation. This has been an ongoing virtual conversation over the last few months, and seen a couple changes, but has always been a fruitful and just challenging conversation between three faith leaders here in the Houston area. And so I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves in a minute. But just as a recap of the goal and purpose of this multi-faith conversation is to be a part of listening to one another, learning from one another, and bring out some just new understandings of what our faiths mean, where there's parallel, as well as where there is maybe some disagreement, and how do we develop that? How do we continue to build a relationship in light of disagreeing with one another, and still be able to serve each other and serve our community together? So with that, I'm going to introduce myself and then let the other two guys here on this be able to share about themselves and where they lead. So my name is Pastor Chris Hall. I get to serve as the missions pastor at Houston Northwest Church, and have been doing that for the last couple of years. But I'm a lifelong Houstonian, lived here all my life, just about. Grew up just around the corner from where I live and where I serve here at H&W. So I am one that is always looking forward to these conversations. Hate that they're virtual. I want to say hate's a strong word, but dislike. Would love to get in person with these guys and be able to do this. However, just in light of our current health situation and here locally, we're doing this virtually. So if you are on YouTube, we encourage you to share this with others, invite them in, and we'll just be able to have a good conversation over here the next couple minutes. So with that, Rabbi Jonathan, please take it away.
Well, good evening. So nice to be with you again, and thank you for that, Pastor. I also feel like we are demonstrating the stages of beardedness. I like to see you've got the early color, and then your holy brother, the Imam, is like early stage, and then this is what happens. There you go. I don't know. I'm not sure whether it's lockdown or what, but I could have sworn it was nice and red about a year ago. So I have an awful lot to share. There's a surprise that a rabbi might have plenty to say on something, but I want to try and move a little bit through tonight's topic, which we talked about the justice of God, or which I have interpreted as divine justice. And I want to look at several sources. Unfortunately, we don't have an ability to screencast what I am reading. I don't know if that is me. I am hearing some like audio artifacts.
I'm not sure what that is either. I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear it too. I'm not sure. Can we try? Let me try to mute myself. Would that help?
I don't. It could be feedback, probably feedback. So yes, I'll make sure I mute myself. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for our tech rehearsal. And when we get ready to do our broadcast, I'm sure we'll have everything smooth out. This is pretty much exactly what it's like for me on a daily basis. So I feel very comfortable with this. And I am, again, really happy to be with you all, especially because there's a lot of really neat stuff. And I'll just go right into it. I don't want to take up too much time, but I might ask you to bear with me. It might take about 10 or 15 minutes to get through all this. We're going to start right at the beginning. And by the beginning, good place to start is the book of Genesis, or in Hebrew, Bereshit. And how about the first verse? That's a good place to start. If we're going to talk about God, talk about the universe and creation, Judaism being the oldest of the Abrahamic faiths. Let's start with the first verse. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. And right off the bat, one of our greatest commentators, named as Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac. He's known as Rashi, but he's way up there. He's like the Babe Ruth of Jewish commentary. He points out that the name that is used, and he's interpreting the ancient teachings of the ancient rabbis, the name that is used for God, and God has many names, probably more common and more well-known actually from, I believe, the Islamic tradition. People talk about, God, but here the name that's used for God is actually Elohim, or in Hebrew, Eloah, or the plural form of Allah. I mean, it's the same word. When we talk about God, we're talking about God. So sometimes that confuses people. I really like that when people go, "Oh, well, we worship a different God than our Muslim brothers do." I say, I don't know. Let's open Genesis, and it says, "Bereshit bara Elohim." I mean, it's the same root. And he points out that the name Elohim is associated with justice, in particular with justice. It does not use the divine name of God. What Jews will say Adonai, which means my Lord, the four-letter name of God, that we generally do not pronounce out of a sign of respect. So I'm not going to break that tradition here. But Yud He Vav He, or sometimes you see it mispronounced or misspelled as Jehovah. We do not use that name. But that is a name that is associated with mercy. But when the world is created, we learn from our rabbis that God initially wanted to create a just universe. That was very important. Justice was very important. So in the beginning, when the universe was being created, God gave precedence to divine justice. However, realized very quickly that the world doesn't always cooperate with what God wants. That's part of free will. And that humanity in particular would require mercy. And so that is why in Genesis 2, the second chapter of Genesis, the language that is used, it says that in the days of in the generations of heaven and earth, when the Lord God, or sometimes translated as the eternal Almighty. Eternal is, I'll mispronounce it, Jehovah. We don't pronounce it that way. And Almighty is Elohim. So when we say the Almighty God, or the Eternal God, or the Lord God, they're two names, different names for God. We sometimes say our Father, our King, different names for God in different combination. Very important. The idea here that God initially wanted justice to be the organizing principle, realized we would need mercy as well. And we know that God is both ultimate justice and ultimate mercy. And so we're going to come back to that. There's something really neat I'm excited to share with you. So now that we know that the whole idea is that you need to have mercy and justice, let's look at Exodus, where we're not talking about how God created the world so much as some of the laws that God gives Moses and the Israelites. You're free from Pharaoh. You're going to establish a new civilization for yourselves, taking you to the promised land. But there need to be laws. We know the Ten Commandments, for example. Well, even before that, we get this teaching that says, Torah echat, there will be one Torah, one law. There will be one law for you, lager hager, betucham. There'll be one law for you and for the stranger that dwells among you. There's one law for you and the resident stranger. A law for all time throughout the ages. It's pretty clear, right? That not only is there justice and there's mercy, but law has to be applied equally. You don't play favorites with the law. Justice requires that you're fair to everyone. And maybe not even fair, because fairness is sometimes out of mercy rather than justice, right? Life's not fair. I mean, so one would argue that fairness comes in through mercy, and that's important too. But whatever it is, you got to be even-handed. And look, especially when we talk about issues of social justice and different areas where we talk about how to improve the world. That's a go-to, right? You've got to be respectful to everyone involved. You have to recognize each other's humanity and that there's one law for everyone, whether you're, a resident or you're a stranger. So moving on to Deuteronomy. And if you're really into biblical scholarship or specifically into the Hebrew scriptures, Deuteronomy is really interesting for a number of reasons, but mostly because it's like a summation and it's Moses' own voice to a certain extent, which is a really neat part of that particular book. So he's reviewing for us, and he points out, you shall appoint, this is Deuteronomy 16, for those of you that are into chapter and verse, you shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes in all the settlements of God that God has given you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. It sounds way cooler in Hebrew, by the way. Here's the key part. Tzedek tzedek tirdof leman tihyeh v'yirishta et haaretz asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha. You shall justice. That's tzedek tirdof. I know zakat, right? Tzedek, tzedakah in Hebrew. Tzedek tirdof. Justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the place that God is giving you. And I want to seize upon that. There's something really, really important here. We always, when I say we, I mean the Jewish community, we really like that tzedek tirdof, the idea that it's not just justice, it has to be just justice. And what does that mean? What is meant by that? It says, well, one who is presiding over the law shouldn't be liable to get punished himself. Like, the justices have to take their job really seriously. Judges and officials. That's a repeat that. You have judges and you have officials. You have people that oversee the judges. You need to have accountability. There has to be a structure. We don't like flat land where everyone does their own thing. Everybody needs friends and they need supervision. It's just an important part of how life works and how society works. And then we get to this really neat teaching from Rabbi Eliezer, who was early, maybe about 2,000 years ago, a little bit more, 2,200 years ago or so. Rabbi Eliezer says, in a place where there is justice, there is no judge. In a place where there is no justice, there is a judge. And what does that mean? I mean, that seems like a riddle. Like, what do you mean? Where there is justice, there is no judge. And where there is no justice, there is a judge. And what does this mean? They explain it. If we make justice below, if we make it here, there's no justice above. There's no need. Because we're taking care of what we're supposed to take care of here. We're doing our job. But if we do not make justice below, there will be justice above. And I love that. The idea is, right? I mean, you do the job. You've been given the Torah. You've been given instruction. We have prophets. We know what we're supposed to do. If we do our job, God doesn't need to get involved. But if we fall short of what our obligations are to each other, you'll have to answer for it. Like, if you're not just, you will answer for it. And if you are just, you've got nothing to worry about. I mean, everything's good, and then everyone's getting taken care of. I found that very powerful. That's an old interpretation of that particular verse. And this is also reminds me of the famous verse that people like to use. Ninakom b'shalem. Vengeance is mine and recompense. Where God says, in Deuteronomy, says, vengeance is God's. Like, you don't have to, God doesn't need us to avenge God's honor, right? I mean, people think that all the time. Like, I've got to be a zealot for God. You really don't. Like, God's got it handled. You know what's expected of you. Study, give charity, take care, be kind to people, do the things you're supposed to do. We don't need to necessarily rise to defend the Almighty's honor. God can take care of that. God will avenge myself, or God says, I will avenge myself and repay them for the evil they have done. Again, focus on earthly justice. Let God worry about settling God's accounts with people. That doesn't mean that you don't have to take care of crime. Of course you do. But those are sins between man and man, or men and human being and human being. Sins or crimes between human being and God, that's not our area. That's not our jurisdiction. That's God. God has a wonderful department for all of that. And alaikum salam, everyone who's here. So I want to share, I hope I'm doing okay on time. Are we okay still? A couple more minutes. This comes from the Talmud. The Talmud is Jewish holy writings that span about 1,000 years and are interpretations, based on interpretations of the Bible and the commandments in the Hebrew Bible. And then it goes off in a million different directions. I know that in every faith tradition, there's books that are built on the Bible, but it is a sacred text to us. And it's something that we gain a lot of insight from, not only religious law, but philosophical insight. And so I want to share this story with you. And it builds on that idea of, if there's no justice, there's justice above, right? If you don't do justly, there's a judge over you, and you need to keep that in mind. And so we hear this story about the justice of divine punishment. 400 barrels of this rabbi, guy by the name of Rav Huna. And Rav Huna had wine. That was his thing. And it turned into vinegar, caused him great financial loss. That was his business. He sold wine. And his wine went bad. It turned into vinegar. Rav Yehuda, along with other sages, his friends say, well, you must look into your deeds. You must have done something because you're being punished, right? Bad things don't happen to you unless God is punishing you. Now, as a modern theologian, I'd probably push back a little bit on that, but I'm not going to do that now, right? We could talk about the book of Job some other time. We know that bad things sometimes happen and there's no understandable reason for that. But in this case, they're saying there's a reason. They're still in a place where you did something, you got some bad, something happened and you had to pay a penalty. And this is how it happened. And he said, really, you think I did something bad? He said, did I do something? Tell me what you think I did. And they said to him, God doesn't make mistakes. You think he would punish you in this way without justice? You must have done something and you must figure out why. So now it's a mystery. And he said, if someone's heard something, I want to know. And one of his friends said, well, we hear that you have tenants on your land. You have tenant farmers. You own a bunch of land and you run this winery and you have tenants, and that you don't give them a portion of what you take in. They're entitled to a portion of what is grown on their land on top of they get to grow their own. And as well as a share of the vines planted. Basically, it's supposed to be a cooperative. I know this sounds probably thrilling to you all, but there's a good point to it. And he says, wait, but I don't owe them anything. The tenant farmer he doesn't give me anything from the produce that he grows. I lease him the land. He grows everything on the land, and he gets to keep it all. And he doesn't give me any of it. So why, when I don't allow him to benefit from any of the new growth, why I'm just taking back what was stolen from me? Like he stole from me first. And they say, well, that's what they say is a folk saying. He said, when you steal from a thief, you have a taste of theft. Like it's like two wrongs don't make a right. He's saying you still did something wrong. Even if you had a legitimate complaint against these people, you're saying, oh, they're stealing from me. They're not giving me what they owe or should, so I'm just going to take it from them. And it all evens out. That's not how justice works. And even though you didn't really violate, again, the idea of justice versus mercy, even though you didn't really violate any laws per se, it's not the right thing to do. It's a form of theft. It's like it's sort of a back end around a theft. And therefore, because also you're a landlord and you're a Rav, you're a rabbi, you're going to be held to a higher standard. And so you're going to get punished for it. And he accepted it. He said, you know what? You're right. I'm going to give him his portion in the future. I won't do that again. You guys are absolutely right. And what they say, and this is what a good part of the story is, happy ending. Some say that there's a miracle and God turned the vinegar back into wine. And others say that the price of vinegar went up in the marketplace and it was sold for the same price that wine would have been sold for. It turned out it was a good year. People got really into vinegar, and so he didn't suffer catastrophic financial loss. But this is that idea, again, coming back, just a nice example of the story of the idea. If there's no justice on earth, then there's a judge in heaven. That we'll see to it. I want to close. Oh, this is actually, okay. All right. With another teaching from the Talmud that talks about, when we talk about the importance of divine justice and how important is it, and divine justice and God and how God seeks to be just and what does that mean? A question is asked, from where do we derive the idea that God prays? Does God pray? We pray. The question is, we're made in the image of God. Does God pray? And the answer is yes. How do we know this? What is our proof? Well, I know everyone here likes Isaiah. Yeshayahu, the prophet, he's a friend to all of us. Well, Isaiah says, I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in the house of my prayer. And the verse does not say the house of their prayer or your prayer. It says the house of my prayer. From here we can see that God must pray. Baruch Hashem, that's right? Praise God. God prays too. And the Gemara asks, meaning the rabbis of the next generation, say, well, what does God pray for? I mean, if you're God, what do you get the divinity that has everything, right? You think he could make it whatever he wanted. Well, God prays. Rav Zutra bar Tuvia said that Rav was a rabbi. It's like these Jedis quoting their Jedi masters, what does God pray for? He says, well, this one master said, God says May it be my will that my mercy will overcome my anger towards my people for their transgressions, and may my mercy prevail over my other attributes through which my people are punished, and may I conduct myself toward my children with the attribute of mercy, and may I enter before them beyond the letter of the law. So basically, God says, may I be kind to to my children and my people, and may I go beyond the letter of the law to the spirit of the law, and always err on the side of mercy, or not err, perhaps, maybe that's too strong a word, but may I come down on the side of mercy rather than justice, knowing that ultimately none of us could really stand up and in the face of what we've been given and make one would think, an accounting that would really justify all the blessings that we do receive. And that, I think, is my time. You have been most generous with your attention and allowing me to share all that text with you all without cutting me off. So may you be blessed. And thank you again. I look forward to hearing my brothers speak here.
That is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I learned a few things, and when my time comes up, look forward to bringing that up and getting your thoughts on a couple other things here in the next couple of minutes. But Imam, you've got a fan club tonight. It looks like, with all of these comments coming in. I'm a little envious, but I'm a pastor, so I can't be. No, I'm just kidding. So, hey, we look forward to hearing from you tonight about the justice of God.
All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Kama sallaita ala Sayyidina Ibrahim wa ala ali Sayyidina Ibrahim. Allahumma barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Kama barakta ala Sayyidina Ibrahim wa ala ali Sayyidina Ibrahim. Fil alamina innaka hamidun majid. First, I'm very happy to be here, actually, and this is not the first time actually I do something like this on YouTube, or this kind of method. It's new to me, but we did this before on Zoom. And I would like actually to talk about this participation from the Muslim community. Alhamdulillah, thank God, I'm very happy. But I would like to see my brothers from the Jewish and the Christian communities to join us as well. We seem to have that same issue, actually, even last time. We had more, way more. There was no comparison even. So inshallah, I hope in the future we will able to bring people together, because I think these kind of talks are important to all communities. We all learn from one another, and people will be surprised when they hear and find out that we are very, I want to say, we do agree with each other. At least I would say, after listening to Rabbi Jonathan, I would say about, it was 80% until he started talking about God praying, and then that dropped to 70.3%. But then after he switched again to talk about a very important concept, which is God's mercy versus his justice, and that we need his mercy, then that percentage went up by 0.01%. But anyhow, we do actually have a lot in common. And if you noticed my beginning prayer, we mention Prophet Abraham. So to us, he's the father of prophets. And every Muslim loves him. Every Muslim, it's actually a part of our 5 daily prayers. You have to learn that prayer, that we connect our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, with Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, as being both great prophets themselves. So there are a lot in common between Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, no doubt. Is the voice clear, first of all, before I start my talk? Everything's okay, hopefully?
It's cracking a little bit, and I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, but I think even both of you are they have this kind of statistics. I don't know what's happening. Maybe we can figure that out later, I hope. So simply, in terms of justice of God, there are 2 types of justice, and I think Rabbi Jonathan mentioned that. There is the divine justice of God, and there is the justice between people, human beings, which cannot, of course, be perfect, because we were created with imperfection within us. We make mistakes. We have greed. We have envy. We have sometimes hatred. And those feelings need to be treated. But generally speaking, we strive to get as much as possible to divine justice of God on earth. But now, for this to happen, we need a guide, because justice is a term that is very easy to manipulate. You can do something and justify it and say that is just. I'll give you an example. Robin Hood, right? Robin Hood, that character, he steals from the rich and he gives to the poor. Now, to him that is just, but in Islam that is not just. You cannot steal. You cannot justify stealing just because you're giving it to the poor. So basically, justice is a very difficult term to agree on. Your justice is different from my justice, and it could be different from somebody else's justice. Then how do we know if my action today is just or not? We need a law, and this is what we have in the Quran. And this is the beauty. Of course, we Muslims believe in the gospel. We believe in the Torah. We believe in all the holy books that were revealed from God to his prophets. Again, it's a part of our belief as Islam. But we believe that the only book that came with those teachings to tell us exactly how to judge between people, there is a verse in the Quran that says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim," which means I seek refuge by God from the evil of the devil. And you probably have heard this statement, I'm sure, before, where God says, "Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addu al-amanati ila ahliha wa idha hakamtum bayna an-nasi an tahkumu bil-'adl." Indeed, God orders you to give the trusts back to whom it belongs to, and whenever you judge between people, you shall judge using the justice that I have revealed to you. So, like I said, justice is a very flexible term. We need a more firm, steady guidelines to tell us what justice is. So, that's the beauty of the Quran. That basically Islam, of course, if we compile both the Quran with the Hadith, the talk of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we actually can reach the divine, or not divine. It's not possible for us at our level, but as much as possible to reach this justice that God is asking us to achieve. But there is a very powerful verse in the Quran that actually says, on the day of judgment, God, when he resurrects all of us, he will make an announcement himself, and he will say, اليوم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, again, اليوم تجزى كل نفس بما كسبت لا ظلم اليوم. Today, every soul shall be compensated, which means either rewarded or punished according to what it had acquired. And then لا ظلم اليوم, there is no injustice today. Now, this word today implies that other than today, there will be a lot of injustice, right? When God makes that declaration that today there shall be, or God makes that declaration on the day of judgment that there shall be no injustice, that means other than this day, there will be injustice. And I think we as human beings have not done a very good job in terms of establishing justice amongst us. Many people, and unfortunately I see this all the time, even people who claim to be religious, and I am talking about my community before anybody else. If I can take your right and get away with it from the law of people, I don't worry much about the law of God. I will remember that one day he will ask me. For us, there is a hadith, basically, again, important talk of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, on the day of judgment, God will establish justice not only between the human beings, but even between animals. If two goats were fighting and one of them had horns and the other one did not have horns, God will establish justice between animals. So this is the divine justice Rabbi Jonathan was talking about. So I do agree with him, like I said, on most of the things he said. And this is, again, amazing to many people. They think that those three religions are so far apart. but they all originated from the one true God that we all worship. And like he said, Allah is mentioned very similarly. I probably will not pronounce it correctly, so I would rather not the way he did it, but it's the same word. Now, moving on to the other concept of justice, the justice of God versus His mercy, we actually make a prayer, dua, basically some kind of prayer to God. We ask God that, oh God, do not deal with me according to your justice. Deal with me according to your mercy, because nobody can stand God's justice. We have this famous story, and by the way, this story talks about one Jewish rabbi. So it's really interesting, but we having in the Islamic tradition that there was this Jewish rabbi who devoted his life to the worship of God. And of course, Rabbi Jonathan can correct me if he has a different version from the story. You're always welcome, of course. That rabbi devoted his life. He isolated himself from everybody else, and he built for himself a small hut kind of room on the top of the mountain. And he said, I'm going to worship God like nobody else has ever done. I am not going to get married. I'm not going to have children. I'm not going to associate myself with anybody. I'm just going to worship God day and night. And he did this for 30 years continuously. He did nothing but fast, pray, and worship God. So after 30 years, he thought that now he can be admitted to the paradise using his own good deeds. He does not need God's mercy anymore. So this is the thought that came to him, that now I have worshiped God so long that I don't need his mercy anymore. I can enter the paradise with my own good deed that I have acquired. That night, in his sleep, in the dream, he finds himself before God on the day of judgment. God says to him, go and enter my paradise with my mercy. He says to God again in the dream, he says, no, I want to enter the paradise, but not with your mercy, with my own good deeds. So God ignores that statement. And he says to him, no, enter paradise with my mercy. He says, no, I want to enter paradise with my own good deeds. God says, that's fine. You're asking for it. Let's do it. First, let's see if you were thankful enough for all the favors, all the bounties that I have given you. Your eyesight alone, every single time you looked at something and you used your eyes, requires a way of thanking me. All of the 30 years that you have invested in thanking me will not even pay you the big bounty of the eyesight. That's not going to be enough. If you want this way, if you want to deal with me this way, then you're not going to enter the paradise. You were not thankful enough. We were only talking about the eyesight. We didn't even talk about the other senses. We didn't even talk about good health. We didn't even talk about the guidance that he gave you. Many people do not have that kind of guidance. So God said, this way you're going to be thrown in the hellfire. He said, no, please, I want to enter the paradise with your mercy. So this is basically what Rabbi Jonathan was mentioning, and I do agree with him 100% on that point, that we cannot stand God's justice. Even if we try to the best of our ability, we still ask for his mercy. But in terms of establishing justice on earth, the point that I'm trying to make here is that we need a law that is not made by man, because the law that is made by man is as imperfect as man. It always has flaws. And the proof to that is we keep changing it, right? We keep modifying it. When we modify law, that is basically an acknowledgement from us that this law was insufficient, right? Every year they change the constitution, or they make some different changes with the maybe not every year, but every now and then we realize that we need to change our laws in order for us to accommodate the situations that are happening new to us. But the law that is made by God works for every time, every place. And that's what we should use amongst us as human beings, and that is the closest that we can get to the justice of God. That's what I wanted to talk about. Thank you for giving me the chance, and I again appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. Rabbi, it sounds like you got a 75% from Imam, so I'm going to do my best to get a more than that.
It's better than I do with most of my congregants, really. It's okay.
Oh man. So we'll see where I land here in the next couple minutes. But seriously though, as I'm listening to both of you tonight, if folks came on tonight to hear disagreement between the three of us, they're going to be sorely disappointed. We're seeing, at least in our words tonight, that the importance of justice in ourselves and in the world, and how we need to be doing that better, how we need to be more proficient in that in the lives that we live in, the communities that we live in. And so in some ways tonight, you'll hear me say Christians have this opportunity to learn from our neighbors of other faiths. And I sincerely mean that. The way that you carry out justice and the way justice convicts you in your lives, and be able to practice that better. I'll give this as an example that has always encouraged me is at the local mosque near my church. They have a medical clinic open for anyone. At least the last I heard, there may be some adjustments because of COVID and whatnot, but I just have always been encouraged by that, the willingness to open their doors for anyone that needed medical help. And so, but as a follower of Jesus, I have to ask myself, did Jesus prioritize justice? Was that something that he saw as a value that was necessary to follow him? And at what level did he make things right? Where did he, put justice in terms of the necessary elements of living out the Christian life? And so emphatically, according to the New Testament, what we see, the way Jesus walked and talked, is that yes, he valued justice at a high level, found it very important, and because he finds it important, because he values justice to those that are around him, then I also must practice that with just the same degree and same tenacity and of showing that justice to those that are around me. There's this story in the Gospel of John, as John is recounting the life of Jesus to those that are reading his account, and it is a story of where Jesus is with scribes and Pharisees in a situation, and I'll read it. It says this: the scribes and Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, Jesus, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So what do you say?" This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down, wrote something with his finger on the ground, and as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her." And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground, but when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the oldest ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more." Now, we have no idea what Jesus wrote in the sand. There's a lot of conjecture about what that is. And frankly, I don't see that there's a lot of importance of what it says, because it doesn't tell us. But what we do see is the way Jesus approached the leaders of the religious community and this woman. And two things happen here. Jesus reminds us, um, those present, that justice is about bringing judgment. The woman was guilty, yes, of breaking the law. And the Old Testament, they were able to find an ability to stone her for anybody, or anyone for that matter, caught in adultery. However, it was the Pharisees that Jesus caught judgment on. When looking at the situation, Jesus sees the judgment falls upon the Pharisees and their actions and their reasons for finding guilt. In the middle of their desire to bring guilt to the woman, they completely overlook the judgment due to the man that was caught in adultery. They just totally ignore him. They just say, forget him. We're going to bring this woman, as if she has no importance in society, and as if she has no value to the community. But the second thing is this: Jesus reminds us, reminds those present, that justice is about bringing grace, and that is something that Jesus will always bring into the room, communicate that, and practice that. And it looks like we've lost him, Mom. So we'll see if he gets back on here in a minute. I hope I didn't say anything that I don't know. But oh, he's coming back. All right, there he is. Good. Because I hope there he is. All right, I'll continue. So Jesus reminds those present that justice is about bringing grace. And the simplest definition: justice is about making things right. That's what justice does, is about making things right. And Jesus's focus is accepting the guilt. In the Gospels, we see him doing that, accepting the guilt, and so that we might have joy in our lives and in those that follow him. I appreciate the way Martin Luther King Jr. said it about justice. He says, justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. I'll say it again because I need to hear it from time to time. Justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. And unfortunately, the American culture that we have or continue to experience in a lot of ways surrounding justice has been finding the guilt in the other to pursue my own individual interests. And that is a shameful way of trying to build relationship, build community, and this selfish desire. Rather, it is the giving of ourselves so that justice can be made known, so that when there are situations that revolt against love, we are giving ourselves over so that justice can be made known and love can shine through. If justice were a priority, the focus would be more than guilting those without authority, at least temporary authority, earthly authority. I love how you talked to me, Mom, about the human law. We're always changing that. We're never getting it right. There's always this loophole that exists, and we would have to look at law by law. But I mean, I would say that those loopholes that people are pursuing is so that their own individual interests can be made known, and so that they can be expressed. But it's opening the door for mercy for those that need it the most. In the Bible, I think Old Testament, New Testament here, we see there are four groups without temporary or earthly authority in society that followers of Jesus are to give justice towards. So Christians, we are to be engaging justice in these four groups, and they are the orphan, the widow, the alien, and the poor. Those four groups, they for some reason are grouped together when we talk about presenting justice to the community and to the world around us. They have always existed on this side of heaven, and they always will be. And so we need to be working towards serving primarily those four groups: the orphan, the widow, the alien, and the poor. There's work to be done in serving these groups. And I believe, at least according to what I'm hearing tonight from the rabbi and the imam, that the value that you put in justice is that multi-faith work should exist here. There, in light of our differences, we can pursue justice together in our community. There are Christians and other faith traditions that take up causes for them, and I believe they should be shared. I believe they should be raised up and communicated into the society. Christian examples. I'll just say from what I know and from my perspective. Here in Houston, there's a group called Houston Welcomes Refugees, and there's other refugee groups that are multi-faith, non-faith, and across the board that are doing great things. Adoption agencies that exist. One of the ones I love is it's a place called New Life that started out of our church years ago, and as we pursue justice, we saw the need to respond to the orphan. But for some reason, there's this difficulty exists when we start practicing this stuff, when we start practicing and prioritizing justice. And it's because this modern era is so highly political that in any action towards any action of love towards the orphan, the widow, the alien, and the poor comes out as this like a liberal mindset. And that's just not the way Christ taught. And then if it is liberal, let's be liberal and be liberal in giving love to those groups. Christ did not come to pursue a political agenda, but one of redemption. And in that redemption, we see that justice. So in many ways, this is a parallel of how God loves us, even when we pursue things contrary to love. And God, as creator, has all rights, and creation is dependent on him. That is a difficult thing to accept, right? That God can take away, just, like we were, Rabbi Jonathan, you were talking briefly about Job, right? Is that he has all these rights. What we have has been given to us. We did not earn it. We cannot keep it. We cannot put it in our pocket and invest it for tomorrow. And if that is true, injustice occurs when I seek to define what or who is worthy of life. God and God alone is worthy. And if we see God as worthy, back to Genesis, if we look back at Genesis and see that how God has created, we see God creating in his own image, and as he impresses in that image the worthiness of himself on us. And when we look to divert our eyes and our spirit away from that, injustice occurs because the love that we that is due to God has been ignored. And when that happens, because the Creator is a God of justice, he does require correction through judgment or through grace. He's not going to just ignore it or let it go. Either way, the result is honor being restored back to God and his greatness. But what about the question that I have, and I think is valid, and maybe others have this as well, is what about the people? What about people getting what they deserve, right? There's, whether it be the Robin Hood that is stealing, or folks that seem to be getting away with stuff all of the time. We get frustrated with that because it's clear that there's injustice being done there. We have all been wronged, and it does not take long to see how the orphan, widow, alien, and the poor are used and ignored from time to time. And how does Christianity treat those that have been caught, that are the cause of hurt and shame? And I don't think we should be able to look at that and just say, well, it is what it is, nothing we can do about it. But we have to recognize that Jesus removes the temporary. Back to the story in John chapter 8, it says, but when they heard it, They went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman. And so Jesus removes the temporary earthly authority and introduces his eternal authority to the least of these. That is his investment. Recognizes that the earthly authority is temporary, but brings value and justice in eternal authority. Starting with the least of these, because true justice is love in action as it brings honor to the giver of the justice. So when we find ourselves exposed, embarrassed for seeking earthly authority, or I'm sorry, earthly justice, what then? What do we do then when we are envious? What do we do when we are trying to take advantage of those groups that are seeking justice? As a Christian, I would have to say Jesus, in all of his authority in heaven and earth, steps in with grace to me as the one who may have cheated the system, and to those that have been cheated by the system, and that grace will always abound. And so because of that, we're able to see justice in a eternal light. Justice is always there, either by judgment or by grace. As a follower of Jesus, my hope is that all of us, of course, will be on the receiving side of that grace versus the judgment. And do or don't follow up in that commitment to Jesus. But my commitment is to see justice be made known, applaud those regardless of faith that seek to correct injustice in the name of love. And I think we have great opportunity to do that, to keep conversation going about how to do that better here in our city, and in the world around us. We could talk all night about those stories, but for tonight, I'll leave it be with that. And again, just like the other gentleman here, say thanks for listening, being part of the conversation. And as we kind of transition to our presentations, we're going to have a Q&A time between one another, share agreement, share disagreement. And of course, of those that are online, if you have any kind of questions, we'll try to get to those as well, and make comments on those. So, guys, any questions, feedback, comments that you'd like to make after you've heard the other two?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, I have a question for both of you, inshallah. See, Islam looks at justice in a very specific, unique way. If somebody takes my right, now let's say, for example, Pastor Chris took my right. We're just giving an example. He didn't, but I'm just saying. Now, Islam says I have two options. I can ask for my right back and get it back, which is called justice, or I can forgive, which is called mercy, and God will reward me for this forgiveness. So this is how Islam looks at it. See, Islam does not force you to forgive. It is your right, and if you want to ask for it, it's yours. And that is not called, in any way that is wrong, or you should not have done that. He took my right, I want my right back. That is justice. If you can forgive, that is better, but you don't have to. So this is how Islam looks at it. I wonder how this concept, when it comes to God's right, I have taken God's right by disobeying him. I can ask him for forgiveness. This is how Islam looks at it. And most likely he will forgive me. He's the most forgiving, the most merciful. But when it comes to people's rights, what if the other person does not want to forgive? Do we force them to forgive? Do we put them in a situation where they can't do anything but forgive? Or we can give them their right back and tell them, you have not done anything wrong. This is your right. It was taken away from you, and we'll give it back to you. So that is the question. May I be excused for only 5 minutes? I am sorry, really sorry about this. I'll be right back in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Well, okay, so I'll take that one, and then when Imam comes back, you guys have to tell him what I said, so I'll answer his question. But however, he probably has some idea of what I'm going to say, I think. But it's a wonderful question. In terms of a Jewish response, it's very interesting. Just off the bat, one of the things that I think is one of probably the most widely held misconceptions about Judaism or the religion or the culture is, of course, the sense of legalism and being very the stone throwers. I love that story in the Gospels. I mean, it's great. And, I too wonder what he wrote in the sand, but I don't think it matters. I mean, the point is he did something that got people thinking, do I really want to be that guy, who's going to throw the first stone? Am I that, high and mighty? Judge not, etc. There's a, but as I said, I think there's a terrible misunderstanding. If you look at Jewish texts, justice comes up an awful lot. Mercy comes up even more. The God of as we say, God of Israel, but we mean the people Israel, not a state or an individual guy named Israel, our father Jacob. The mercy is central to that idea, and in fact, justice in and of itself, especially amongst people, is restorative, not punitive. And in fact, even our Day of Atonement, the idea is like if you don't forgive people, if you want to insist on your rights because legally you have the right to do it, and you can't tell someone they have to forgive. It's true, you can't force someone to forgive, but it's going to be really hard for you to go before God and be like, I refuse to forgive a human being who is as fallible as I am and just as error to mistakes as I am before you. I'm not going to forgive them, but you should forgive me. And his sin or his crime was against a human being, and mine's against our Creator. So it takes the Jewish word would be chutzpah. It takes some gumption. I'm trying to keep it family friendly. You all can choose your cultural metaphor, whatever it is. But you got some guts if you're willing to do that, like not forgive a human being for taking your rice or your wheelbarrow or whatever it is. That being said, there's a really neat thing here, and an example is given. I've got a great example ready to go about the difference between like restorative justice and punitive justice. An example is given of a man who steals they have a beam, good beam of cypress, nice straight, solid beam. And he steals it and he builds a house, and he uses that beam as the central beam in the roof of his house. It's load bearing. That's like the big beam on his house. And they know he took it. Like it's not a surprise. They figured out he confesses, yeah, I took the beam. I built my house with it. And the debate is, does he have to give that beam back to the guy who stole it from? Or can he give him the value of it? Now, the idea is, the legal thing is, you took that beam, you give that beam back. What you took back, you can. And, it's your fault you built a house around it. It's not my fault that you now have to spend, let's say $100,000 to give me back, a $5,000 beam or whatever. I don't know what cypress beams go for these days. But the fact is, like, it's not my fault. It's not our fault that you took something stolen and then built a house around it. Shame on you. Now you have to give that exact beam back. And the rabbis have a debate between the schools of thought that say, technically, that's correct. You took that beam, you should give that beam back, and shame on you for stealing that piece of wood. However, another rabbi says, that makes things worse. He needs to replace the beam. It doesn't have to be that exact beam. He has to replace what was stolen, which is a beam that is equivalent in value and same quality and similar. It doesn't need to be that identical beam, even though the strictest reading would be you give back what you took. And this leads into another discussion about the very idea of eye for an eye. People will say, well, the Jews are eye for an eye, hand for hand, tooth for tooth. It doesn't work that way. My eyesight, Chris doesn't wear glasses. I don't know, maybe you wear contacts, but no, your vision's great, right? Your eyes are better than mine. If I poke out one of your eyes and we get in a heated theology fight and I stab you with a pencil or something. Put out your eye, you know? Well, one of my eyes isn't as good as yours. You're younger and you have better vision. So in order to make it fair, does that mean you got to take 1.5 of my eyes? Really, the rabbis actually have a discussion. They realize it doesn't work. You can't say eye for an eye, hand for hand. It doesn't, even though it says it 3 times in the Torah, it's not what it means. You go, how can it not mean what it says in black and white? It's because you use your brain, you use your reason. What it means is the value has to match. If you injure someone, you have to, the remedy has to fit the injury. It has to fit what the injury is. And the goal is not necessarily punishment unless the person lies about it or is duplicitous about it, right? There's a difference between, like, you know, accidentally dropping a hammer and killing someone and you have to run away, manslaughter, versus first-degree murder, like laying an ambush for someone. There's a difference between, like, you know, theft because you were hungry and you took their sandwich, and you know, theft of where you're hiding it and you're lying about it. So again, justice is really central, or rather, mercy is central to that. The idea is to restore everyone. The person who was taken from has to have what they lost given back to them. The person who has committed a crime has to have an opportunity to regain their honor so that they can say, I paid my debt and we can start over and be forgiven. I don't know if that answers the question, but I ate up a lot of time.
I don't know if it answers the question either, but it sounded good to me. I think in terms of, for Christianity, when we talk about forgiveness, how to handle that, how to, you know, if I sin against my someone else, if I am seeking forgiveness, you know, how far do we go in that? How deep does that forgiveness, ability to forgive, exist? And so one of Jesus's followers, Peter, who is about as hard-headed as they come, comes up to Jesus and says, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him as many as 7 times? And I'll let Rabbi Jonathan another time talk about why he comes up with 7. But Jesus's response is, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times, metaphorically saying there is no end in sight when it comes to forgiveness. That should always be a central part of who you are, no matter what they may take from you, no matter what they may do to you. And you should always be ready to forgive, regardless of what they have wrong they may have done against you. And so living that out is one thing, and saying it is another. But I believe that as Jesus is saying this, that we should be, Christianity should be at its character and at its core, a belief that, and a faith that is focused centrally on grace, on forgiving over and over and over, and not because we're don't recognize it, don't recognize or ignorant to someone doing wrong against me, seeking injustice against me. It's not like we don't see it, don't know it, but at the end of the day, we're saying, in light of what you are doing to me, I am going to show forgiveness to you. That is, you can look throughout the gospel and see, through the gospels rather, and certainly throughout the New Testament, where Jesus is showing that way of living, of forgiveness, and because of his ultimate forgiveness in bringing honor back to his sacrifice, so that honor could be made again back to the relationship between God and man. That chief example, we are to live that out. We are to live that out into the daily lives of where we live. So to follow along, I'm gonna just kind of tag this question here that just came up, and I think it kind of speaks into that. If God forgives humans, why must a human forgive his aggressor? And I'll kind of give a 2-part answer to that. Spiritually, yes, we have to forgive so that love can be made known. And that forgiveness is not always easy. It's not always immediate. Maybe it shouldn't always be that way. And when someone does acts unjustly towards me, depending on what it is, that person should receive justice, whether that be if they're doing something against me criminally, that forgiveness doesn't mean that they shouldn't receive that punishment for what they have done to me. So I don't know, maybe Jonathan, you can add a little more to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to take it. I did see, if you'll indulge me, just going to saw a couple comments go away. One about conversion to Judaism. People are born Jewish, but people do convert to Judaism. But it's traditionally, I mean, it's not something that we think is neat. We don't proselytize because we think that like God loves everybody, and like it's. I mean, but if people do, I mean, there is a process, and so the answer is yes. People do convert to Judaism. It's like joining the tribe, But I did really like another comment, and I will answer the other one because I think it was really important. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correct, but Tosif Chaudhry. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. That's absolutely true. But if we talk about forgiveness and value of eyes, one of the parts of that discussion is if you're a Jew, you're someone who uses your eyes like you're an artist versus ostensibly I'm a rabbi. I talk for a living, right? I don't necessarily need to have great vision to do my job. So what if someone who needs their vision for their job gets in a fight with someone who doesn't? So the conversation is, again, about the remedy, making sure it fits. It can't be just this cold sort of just, this is a law and this is it. You hurt my hand, I hurt your hand. But, well, the values may be different. A carpenter, speaking of Jesus, right, needs a hand more than a singer, let's say. So enough of the will I ever play piano again jokes. Speaking to Afshan's point, it's critical for us. I mean, the Jewish view would be to forgive human beings because we are called to emulate and put into the world what we want to be reflected about our Creator. When we say that we are witnesses for God, when we do certain things, as God is merciful, we should be merciful. When we say that God feeds the hungry, we have to go feed the hungry. We don't expect sandwiches to fall out of the sky, despite the biblical stories about manna or quail. Don't eat sky quail. Learn something from my ancestors, the Israelites, right? They all got sick from eating the sky chicken. You have to bring the sandwiches to people. God gives us the power to clothe the cold and shelter the orphan. I mean, so it's on us. So if you want God to be forgiven, you have to do your part. I mean, there's really a partnership involved, which is for us why it's so important for us to be able to forgive human beings. That's part of our job, as the Jewish viewpoint, again, being that we're in partnership with God, and we're supposed to carry out things that angels don't or won't, or that God has placed in our hands and on our shoulders to do. So, there it is. It's like, be the love in the world, be the change you want to see. Pray as if everything depends on God, act as if everything depends on you. And my prayer has been answered because I prayed for the imam, and here he is.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi Jonathan.
You're
I'm
welcome.
sorry about this. Just technical difficulties. I'll be the camera will be back in a few minutes, but I would like to know what I missed.
What Rabbi said, you would agree with 100%. He got 100.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So I already passed.
Oh man. Rabbi, I'll make this point, and it's really not a question, just a comment. What I love about God as the Creator is He has always included. I think Christianity has sometimes said like the foreigner was not always valued in Old Testament law or in the Torah, and that just is always kind of rubbed me the wrong way because it's just not true. Just happened to be reading Joshua, the book of Joshua. Been reading through that, and it caught me this morning as I was reading this in Joshua chapter 8 at the last verse. It says, "There was not a word of all that Moses commanded that Joshua did not read before the assembly of Israel and the women and the little ones and the sojourners who lived among them. And I've always loved that about how we can see the character of God being so true to those that we would say are ignored. You know, and the ones that he lists out. I mean, like he is certain to make sure people know that the women, the children, and the sojourners are all part of the family of God. They are all valued, and they all have a place there. And I just think that should challenge us in some ways to pursue that, knowing that man, just because no matter where you're from, no matter who you are, there's a place for you in the kingdom of God. And I know that, there's obviously disagreement here, and we don't need to go through all of this, of what that kingdom looks like. But just to know that those groups are part of that, I think speaks volumes to the beauty of God and how he desires the justice for all peoples.
It's certainly important. I mean, so much of, I think a lot of it depends on how academic and how much trouble I want to cause myself, but religion, civilizations, cultures, there's a tribal element to it. It's like and some of it is, I think on a superficial level, it's okay. We can get away with it. But I think if you really start drilling down, that's where it becomes dangerous. Like it's in a sense that, one would hope that as professionals in our particular faiths, that we would be partial to our particular wells, but we understand that there's a river, and that ultimate wisdom. Sort of say when bad things happen in Judaism, and bad things seem to happen, we say, "Blessed is the true judge, Baruch Dayan Emet," and it means not only is God's judgment true, but it also means that God understands things that we don't. That's the true judge. Everything else is just sort of an imitation. We can think we understand the big picture, but we don't. And I don't want to conduct myself as though I'm sure that I'm right. We shouldn't be, as we say, don't be too sure of yourself to the day you die. After you die, you can be sure of yourself. Up until that point, have some humility. But obviously, when there's a marketplace of ideas and people were competing, and before Christianity, the Jews were mixing up with the Zoroastrians, or the Greeks, with their the view of the world and things that we saw as culturally that didn't match with what we thought we valued or wanted. And people talk smack about each other. And then there was obviously a lot of competition and some hurt feelings between the early church and the remnants of Judea. And Islam came along, and then they were the New York Yankees of religion. So it's like, I mean that in a good way. There's always a piece of that. But I think once you drill down and you actually learn more about each other's faiths, that's been my experience. The differences, and there are significant differences. There's no question about that. There's a reason that we all don't go to the same place on the same day of the week. But ultimately, the relationship that we have with the Creator is the important thing. I love to quote the great Rabbi Bruce Lee as often as I can. He wasn't a rabbi, folks. I'm sorry, but still a very bright man, and actually teacher of one of my teachers. And he used to say, he said about martial arts, but it applies to religion. I believe it, that it's like a finger pointing at the moon. If you focus on the finger, you miss the heavenly glory. It doesn't mean that we're partial to our paths, or that we believe that our paths are the right one for us, or maybe that we think everybody should follow our path. That's okay. Well, I just don't believe in compulsion. So I think I'm becoming Muslim, because I know that that's a big part of Islam as well. One that I greatly respect and agree with. But it's, I don't know where I took the exit ramp on that and just started talking again, but there you have it. I think that those differences, they're important to talk about, and they're interesting because they help me understand where my own understanding of my own faith or other faiths may be lacking, and allows me to get truer. It's like, sculpture. You sculpt away what's inessential. It gets better and stronger because I'm able to see blind spots and go, oh, I hadn't thought of it in that way. Maybe there's something that I need to consider. And it ends up renewing my faith. or enhancing it.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, I don't know if you see this question here. Do you want to take that? I know it's not really on topic with what we're talking about tonight, but I don't want to ignore it. If you can
Oh,
give a 10
no, no.
second, 30-second
No, it's
response
fine.
to
It's
that.
fine. No, I'm happy to answer.
I'll put it up
So-
here so we can see it.
Oh, sure. All right. Well, the Jesus, nobody messes with the Jesus. First off, that's very important. If you're a big Lebowski fan, and people were wondering if I'd be able to work some reference into that, but meaning Jesus as Messiah. So the idea of Messiah, this is, I mean, it's hard to answer this quickly and concisely, but I'll do my best. Jews do not accept Jesus as the Messiah in the sense of the way that Christians think of Messiah being, a begotten Son of God, God made immanent in human form. It's sort of a very foreign idea to classical Judaism. Jews certainly believe that Jesus was a teacher, that he was martyred for his beliefs. If maybe not, I wouldn't say. I think I'd be disingenuous if I were to say that we view him as a prophet. Okay, in terms of he doesn't fit in with our concept of what prophecy is. But a prophetic figure, a teacher, a martyr, part of our tradition. Probably, arguably, would say, but one of the most important human beings that ever lived. Certainly, but in terms of what Messiah does in a Jewish framework of what Messiah is supposed to do, doesn't necessarily fit into that. We have just a different view of what Messiah does and means, and it's much more of a political leader and a sign that we're ready to be redeemed rather than a redeemer itself. So it's easy to get really into the woods on that. So it's not really second coming or waiting for Messiah. It's just that he doesn't fit into that particular view of what the Messiah is supposed to do for us. Which is why there's different faiths. I mean, it's just a different conception of the relationship we have. But people often say, "Why do you hate Jesus?" No, we don't hate Jesus at all. I mean, he's one of us. I mean, in fact, love a lot of what is taught in the Gospels. Just don't necessarily agree with everything that developed. I hope that helps.
I know that's a thick question. I appreciate you being able to respond to that. It's good to hear it from my perspective as well. I'm gonna answer this as we may not be able to get to all of these tonight as we kind of work through some of the theological the big ones, which are all valued, and I think they're all important. But I think as we are seeing these, they're things to chew on, think about for future conversations. But I do want to take this one, and I'm going to try to answer it as best I can. And we recognize that politics has become very divisive in our current context over the last few months, making things very difficult and challenging in a lot of ways, and things we're still trying to work through. And I would say, in terms of reconciliation, all I can do is say from a Christian perspective. And the Christian perspective, when it talks about reconciliation, is going and saying, and this is hard, but going and listening, going and finding agreement, and pursuing those things where we can agree on. Otherwise, for example, Rabbi Jonathan, I mean, the things he said about Jesus, I agree maybe 25%, right? And it's not a discredit to him, and it's not trying to devalue who he is or what he's about, but it's me just saying, look, even though we have differences, we can still work through that. And the best method in all of those things is to be able to forgive where forgiveness is needed, and to be able to love my neighbor as myself. And I think that's what Jesus says, right? Is the greatest commandment, is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is what summarizes the law. And to do that, we will see reconciliation, maybe not on this side of heaven, but certainly on the other side. And as we do that, we will see love prevail, and we will see it be made the chief end of who we are. So, and then to answer your other question about denomination, I'm part of a Southern Baptist church, but I would emphatically say that even as I may serve as a Southern Baptist church, we're a church that seeks to welcome in all and teach Jesus above all else. And then I'm going to assume that it's going to lead into maybe what are the differences of denominations. Don't have the time for that tonight, but would again emphasize that all of Christian denominations, their chief end is to seek Christ and who they are. Imam, any thoughts, questions as we kind of draw to a close here tonight?
Well, like I said in the beginning, when we have more participants from the other faiths, maybe I can get some questions from them as well. It makes me feel jealous that I don't get questions. Even the past program, we had the same thing. Nobody's asking me anything. I'm just sitting there doing nothing. But I do appreciate everything both Pastor Chris said and Rabbi Jonathan. And like Rabbi Jonathan said, we do have differences, but I do believe in this saying: just because you and I are different, that does not make us enemies. We can always be friends and be still different at the same time. Some people believe that if you're not 100% a copy of me, then you are wrong 100%, and I can't be your friend. And we are trying, especially here in Islam, in our Muslim community, to remove these thoughts that um, as long as we have a lot in common, we have really very few things that we can say that we disagree about. And to be honest, I would say maybe Islam, Christianity, and Judaism have at least, and at the very least, 70% of things that we believe 100% the same. And the 30%, and maybe it's different, we have those differences, and it's what makes us who we are. I do respect the other religions. I never think that, just because you are from a different faith, that we cannot be friends at the end of the day. So I think it is important for all of us to instill those thoughts and those teachings in the hearts of our followers and those who like to listen to us in our communities. That will bring more peace and love and understanding um, in between all these communities. And if Pastor Chris or Rabbi Jonathan have any questions to me, you can always, of course, ask, since the audience do not like to ask me questions.
I'll ask you this real quick, and I'm gonna probably not get my question right, say it correctly. So just bear with me. But you had said something about when you get into paradise, there's it's based on your works or God's mercy. Just kind of real quick, how would you say, from an Islamic standpoint, allows us get to enter into paradise? Is it do our works have any importance into getting into paradise, or is it strictly God being merciful to those that follow Him?
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, yes. Islam says that do your best, everything you can, everything in your ability. Uh, Basically, follow the teachings of God, of the prophets that He sent to you. But you will never be able to earn enough good deeds to enter the paradise without His mercy. So we try our best to please God, but His mercy is what we need to enter the paradise. It basically works together. You cannot just say, you know what, since my good deeds are not going to be enough anyway, then I might as well do whatever I want and then ask Him for His mercy. That's not how it works. We try our best. We want to please Him. We want Him to be happy with us. But at the same time, I know that I cannot afford the paradise with my good deeds alone. I need His mercy. And that actually establishes this kind of love and hope, that I hope He gives me His mercy. Just like the example I gave up in the beginning about the rabbi who thought that he can enter the paradise with his good deeds alone. Maybe the good deeds that he acquired is more than what we all of us combined, because 30 years is a long time doing nothing but worshiping God. I don't think anybody of us can do that. But still, the paradise is this perfect place that everybody dreams of. We cannot afford it unless God gives us his mercy. So we learn to love him through this relationship. Oh God, I love you and I want you to have mercy on me and admit me to the paradise. For I know no matter how much I try, I will not be able to afford it. So I hope that answers the question.
No, that's good. I appreciate that. I think that helped out in your response. So I appreciate that. Guys, I'm gonna say that we're getting in a lot of great questions here, ones that we certainly don't have time for tonight. Not that they're not important, but want to recognize that our time as well as those that are watching tonight. And I would just say, as they are coming in, we want to take note of those to be able to think through how to respond to those in a more fleshed out time than what we have in our closing thoughts in our closing moments here. And I'm thankful for those that are asking those questions. And I hope that we can take a look at these, be able to come back soon and respond to those as well. So as we come to a close, like I said, Rabbi Imam, do you have anything to add? You'd like to concluding remarks?
Just nice to see you. See you all. It's good. Nice to have power. I hope everyone's doing all right out there, by the way. I mean, it's talking about justice, getting what one hopes is we don't always get what we deserve, right? With cold snaps or what we don't think we deserve. So I hope everyone's okay out there. That was it. I'm out of gas.
Well, for me, again, I'm very happy to be a part of this, and I just have one suggestion. Why don't we have this more often? I don't. For me, I am open all the time. I'll be happy to be a part of any interfaith dialogue. I learn myself a lot, and I would like to know about other religions myself. To be honest, this is a curiosity I have, and I think most of us share that curiosity. So I don't really know. For me, this happens every once in a while. I don't know if Pastor Chris gets more often of those or Rabbi Jonathan gets more of those, but for me, this happens. So I don't know. Does do the other gentlemen have more of those going on, or what's happening?
That's a great thought. As you just share about wanting to do this more often, I think that's great. And I hope that we can continue to do this. My hope, as long as you guys are willing to hang out with me, to do this more often, once a month or so, to be able to respond to questions that folks have, as well as just kind of share about each other's religions. And what I like about it is knowing that you guys are local, that we're all living in the same community, our congregations, our neighbors. And I think that makes it really important for me to be able to be part of this conversation. And so, yeah, let's keep this going. Let's keep the conversation happening. My hope is that one day we are able to do this in person. Of course, I think that'll add a lot of this great. It'll deepen the conversation as we dialogue with one another. There's something about the split screen that just doesn't do it for me, but understand why that is what it is. Thankful for the technology that we have. I am a little embarrassed to say I've never seen The Big Lebowski, Rabbi. So you'll have to. I know. And he's muted, but
we
I
have
don't
to
know.
fix that. Yeah, we have to fix that.
And but no, seriously, I mean, I'm thankful for you guys that you would take the time, and as well as those that are listening tonight. And like you said before, I hope everyone is doing well. And as we are working through repairing homes and that kind of thing after last week's weather. but my closing remark is really simple: is just, again, let's seek a way to love God with all our heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. And as we do those things, we'll find ways to serve with one another. So, again, thanks for being here. And as we get closer to doing this again, you'll hear more info about what those topics are and how to connect in the near future. So, guys, I hope you have a good night. Thanks again for everybody that's viewing and watching tonight. And then until next time.
Thank you.